So if you're a client or an individual considering doing surveillance through an investigator or even yourself, let's take a look at the pros and cons of doing surveillance. Hello, this is Dave at AFX Search, licensed investigators and fraud investigators. First thing we want to look at is surveillance going to be the best way to get the intelligence? A lot of times there may be cheaper or more efficient ways to get the intel rather than following somebody around at length. We start by asking, what is the question that you want an answer to? There may be a lot more clever ways to get that answer to that question. Once surveillance is established as the best way to go, we're going to determine if it's going to be static or moving surveillance. Static surveillance means that a person at a certain place at a certain time will be observed. We know they're going to be there, or we want to know what activity is being undertaken at that time. And that static surveillance is a lot less expensive than a moving or following surveillance. So that'll be the first determination. If we can do it as static, it'll be cheaper for the client. Next thing is, can we use GPS? Is GPS allowable under those conditions? There's very strict requirements on when and how you can use GPS or tracking devices on a person or on a vehicle, and we'll determine if that's the case. That can also make the case more efficient. Remember that surveillance, whether it's done by an investigator or an individual, has to be done as a legal activity. You have to make sure that the privacy rights of that individual are maintained. You can't use binoculars to peep in someone's window if they have an expectation of privacy. You can't encroach on private property. If video surveillance or observations are documented and this person doing surveillance, an investigator, is on private property that they had no permission to be on, that evidence may be excluded from use. And in worst case scenario, there may be liability attached to the person doing surveillance or even the client who hired the investigator. So if you're hiring an investigator with the intention that they might be able to do something wrong or do something illegal that you can't do, remember that even if they do it, since you hired them, you may have some liability. So make sure that your investigator is using proper methods to do their investigation, surveillance or otherwise. And remember, expectation of privacy for an individual extends to audio and visual enhancement. So if you're using some kind of magnification device to get video from a farther distance, or on a telephoto lens, or even using a parabolic mic to get sound from farther away, there may be some prohibition of using that in your investigation. You could be sanctioned. The investigator could have fines or some liability, and that could extend to the client. Worst case scenario, it won't be admissible in court for your use. Make sure that if you're using a third party, that they're properly licensed, because if it ever goes to court and you hire somebody who's not licensed, that could be an issue as well. Remember, surveillance is an activity that is licensed under most state laws. In order to perform surveillance as an individual or even as a hired investigator, that's an activity that requires a license. So make sure that any activity that is a licensed activity is done properly. If you have more questions about surveillance or other investigative tools, you can reach us at our website, afxsearch.com.